in order to find the Jules, the Jules, right? Right? I mean, like, it could have been something else he finds. But the idea of this and the idea of the allegorical piece of this is it can hit without you understanding. I don't mean to be like, oh, well, this is English class. And in order to even feel something in the film, you have to understand that, oh, this is actually a metaphorical deconstruction of the self to find that core that's within. You don't have to have that to feel it in the movie because it works on multiple levels. But that is there for you. And it's not something that you're making up. It's Schrader. That is absolutely what Schrader's doing. He's showing us at the beginning, he has constructed the self out of his objects. He's showing us he has to remove everything he's constructed to get to the core of who he is. Welcome to the Couch to 4K podcast. I'm Mike Caulfield. I'm here with Jim Groom. We believe a number of things here, Jim. What do we believe?
We believe that physical media will save the world.
Physical media will save the world. 2 films are better than 1. 6 films are better than 2.
6 films are better than 2. We're getting to the point of 20, but we also found out something new, I think, over the last week or so.
What was that?
That we're not just couch to 4K, where it can also be couch to 5K.
Okay. So this is so last week I felt like there was a little bit of doubt. I felt a little bit of doubt and a little bit of judgment about my couch to 4K, couch to 5K plan, which I introduced. Well, I mean, first let me say this. The most of the doubt was directed at my life hack, which I introduced last week.
Big life hack.
I felt very judged. I felt very judged by this life hack.
I've been thinking about it all week.
So for those of you that weren't listening to the last episode that we did, which was on Diva, I introduced my life hack, which is you get up in the morning like you're going to exercise, and then instead of exercising, you watch a film before work. Now, I want to emphasize, just for the record, and because who knows who will listen to this in the future, I'm talking about you get up about 6 o'clock or so.
Quarter
you
to
start
6
to film.
is what
quarter
you said
6,
last week.
You start, quarter to 6. You start to film.
You get your coffee.
You get your coffee. You're done with this by 7:30, right? I'm not watching, The Godfather Part 2. I like. You're done with this yet. You're making it to work on time. I just want to emphasize all of these things because, the media record can always come back to haunt you. So I want to emphasize you're getting in, but you're going to work and you've already watched a movie and you feel great. And Jim, you were a little unconvinced by this.
I was not unconvinced. I believe you're doing it. I was just like, oh my God, that's crazy. So
it's decadent.
It is decadent in the best possible way. Like someone who's waking up at 5:45, 5:45 to watch a movie is great. The question that came up though is, all right, Mike, so you're doing couch to 4K and you're kicking that ass. But can you now do couch to 4K and
So,
throw in a couch to 5K?
You mentioned that you had been exercising, and I did start to feel guilt. I did start to feel a level of guilt here. I'm very consciously substituting what could be a really good exercise regimen because I'm getting up religiously, 5:45, and I could be putting that to exercise. And so I said, well, I got a treadmill. I got a room now. I have a treadmill in it. I have a TV that I just installed in it. I'll just do that. And that I think was where you were doubtful. You were like, you're getting on the treadmill, you're doing the Stairmaster, and like in what you're watching like Bresson's Pickpocket. Like what the heck are you? What the heck are you doing there?
What was great though is so this week for Mike gives me updates throughout the week, and it's wonderful. And so we're watching movies around Paul Schrader's American Gigolo, which we'll get to.
I thought I'd try it. Yeah.
And he says to me, yeah, I watched Hardcore. That was definitely a treadmill movie. I made it through for an hour. So now we have a new categorization of movies. It's like, is it a treadmill movie?
Well, I started and I just started this whole process and I absolutely screwed it up. I watched Cat People.
Jesus, what a weird.
So Paul Schrader, this week we are doing American Gigolo, and one of the movies Paul Schrader does after Paul Schrader, famous guy, wrote Taxi Driver, would be famous just for that script, really. But then comes along and actually does American Gigolo. After American Gigolo, he does Cat People. Now, I thought, I've seen the original Cat People, which was part of the 1940s supernatural wave, which is a fascinating wave. We should do the 1940s supernatural wave. In the 1940s, there was this thing where up until the 1940s, a lot of the supernatural stuff that appeared in films was really about debunking the supernatural. Like, oh, there'd be a ghost, and at the end, it's like the Scooby-Doo plot, right? At the end, like, they pull off the thing, and oh, it's actually the person trying to steal this woman's money, you know? But in the 1940s, for some reason, there starts to be this real supernatural wave, and Cat People is part of that. And Cat People is a story where a woman kind of has these flashes where she starts to realize that, you know, it's difficult to describe. It's a really weird film for the 1940s, but that she's actually like a cat person that turns into a cat, you know, a panther, actually, right? So I thought, I've seen Cat People. I'll check out the Paul Schrader remake of Cat People. Jim, have you seen this film?
I have, both in 82 or 83 and today.
Oh my God. Cat People is a film that involves Natasha Kinski, running
McDowell?
around very naked for a lot of the film. And in a brother that seems to be stressing that the way their family handles things is to keep all the sexual relations in the family. And I would just say, like, I would have never thought that a plot that consists a lot of Natasha Kinski running around naked would be such sheer plod to get through.
It was terrible.
How does that film become boring? I don't know.
I mean, maybe we got older because Natasha Kinski was a different thing when you were a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old in 82. But it was interesting. Now, my question to you is it a treadmill film?
No, it's not a trend. Cat People do not. I mean, I think in general, your life will not be improved by watching Cat People. But I would definitely say if you're going to choose to watch it, don't watch it with family in the room and don't watch it on the treadmill.
Tell you though, one of the funny things about Cat People, I know that's not what we're here to talk about, and it's such a weird thing because he's making Cat People and he's writing the script for Raging Bull at the same time.
Yeah, what the
fuck, right? Like, what is up with this guy? And then he has, you know, the star really of Cat People is Natasha Kinski, and she is good in that she's young and beautiful.
Yeah. And she's hypnotic on screen, totally. Actually, much more so when she's not, you know, much more so when she has her clothes on, actually.
Totally.
She's hypnotic. She has a sort of mystery around her, yeah.
But I really like John Hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like him. And then he's in like Chud after this, and he has such a he's in After Hours. So I like it almost because it's like the 80s, and then Cat People also, and we'll talk about this with American Gigolo, has a crazy soundtrack and is also kind of announcing the 80s in some different ways, not as stridently as American Gigolo. So there's a lot there. It's just not nearly executed as well as American Gigolo.
So let's get into American Gigolo. The reason why we looked at this is we were looking at Diva as one of the films that announces the 80s. And Diva is a film that, as we discussed, is pure style. It's pure style. And when I say style, I want to be really careful. I don't mean that style lacks depth. Van Gogh was style, right? You know, if you look at a Klimt painting or you look at a Hopper painting, that's style, right? And yet it's also deeply moving, and it's also deeply human, and it's also deeply meaningful. But it means through style. It means through the surface. And so that's one thing I want to be clear about. A Diva is a shallow film in terms of what it represents. What it represents is nothing, it's trivial. But Hopper painted a bunch of people in a diner, right? Like there's nothing there except the style, right? And the style speaks to you. And so, but Diva has very little plot. The plot is completely in service of the style, and that's the way that Diva announced the '80s. And then I looked and said, well, I'm just interested. What film do other people think announced the '80s? And I found this quote by Chuck Klosterman, who says that the 1970s began with the stabbings at Altamont and ended during the opening credits of American Gigolo. I'm like, okay, we got to check this out. Jim, what's your verdict on Chuck Klosterman? Let's just start with
100%. I mean, I hadn't read that till you linked the article to me. And then I hadn't seen American Gigolo in 30 years, 40 years. I mean, and going back to that, I didn't remember the opening credits. He nailed it.
Yeah. There's something that goes like the opening credits to this film, and we should just maybe do a little bit of what this film is. I'll just do the plot, and then we'll get to the opening credits. Julian Kay is a high-priced male escort in Los Angeles, speaks several languages, and takes real pride in his surfaces, his clothes, his apartment, his body, the car. A self that he has assembled and perfected. He works mostly through a madam named Anne, though he sometimes picks up jobs from a pimp named Leon James. He starts seeing Michelle Stratton, a state senator's wife, who pursues him and claims to feel a genuine connection to him. Then a woman in Palm Springs turns up murdered. A wife that Julian had surfaced in a violent session that Leon set up, and the police start building a case against him. His alibis fall apart one by one. Anne cuts him loose. The client he was with that night won't provide an alibi, and he works out that Leon set him up and is shielding whoever did it. He goes after Leon, who dies in a struggle on a balcony. Julian is arrested. Anyway, what gets him out is Michelle lying to the police. She tells them he was with her the night of the murder, which he wasn't, torches her marriage and her husband's career to do it. The last scene has him behind glass in jail, finally admitting he needs her. A beat Schrader lifts directly out from the ending of Bresson's Pickpocket. So I don't know. Anything to add to that summary, Jim, before we...
No, I have things to add along the way, but no, that's an excellent summary of what this movie did and what it was about.
It is a movie that has a plot under it, and the plot is it's an ancient sort of plot, and it's a hell of a engine as a plot, and it also has style on top of it, and the two things work in concert. But I'll just say about the underlying plot, if you've seen it, which I hope you have before you're listening to it. If you haven't, go watch it. The plot is very solid. The plot is the typical engine where a person thinks they have their life together. They've perfected, the surfaces of their life. They believe they've perfected the self. And they also believe that they have made it into a certain social stratum or are on their way to doing that. I mean, his goal is to do this, to invest, and then to take residence in this sort of social strata at some point when he's not doing this particular job anymore, have invested enough, saved up enough that he can navigate this. He does think that some of these connections have some reality under them. And when you look at how he interacts with these people, again, he's not under an illusion that he's not paid to do this stuff. But at the same time, he really does believe when he goes to get his alibi from this woman, given the relationship that we've seen and given the level of threat that he is under, that these two things together will produce an alibi. And it doesn't, right? So we watch as the self that he has perfected has to be completely deconstructed, completely torn to shreds. And then once that is in the place, I mean, I'm sorry, just to get like, it's almost like a Dostoevsky, like Russian literature thing. Like once he is reduced to nothing, he becomes able to accept love. And that's what you see in the final, I think, really touching scene, is that stripped to nothing with all the surfaces stripped off of him, literally in a gray jumpsuit,
exactly,
behind glass. You have that final, I think, touching scene Michelle Stratton touching him through the
also
glass.
think it's really interesting on Schrader's part. And one of the things I really liked about the movie is that they refused to go into the psychology of Julian to try and tell you why he's like this.
They
right?
don't
He's
care.
Like, I give older women pleasure. And, Michelle is kind of prodding on that. Like, why older women? Like, what was your mom? What was this? Like trying to do the kind of Freudian analysis, and you never get it.
You never get it.
I was like, that's so interesting. Like, so many films would fall down that hole and never climb out.
Schrader himself and Taxi Driver. So I watched just the very beginning of Taxi Driver in prep for this. In Taxi Driver, the initial credits, you see a taxi go by just for like a very brief second. You see the car. And then what do you see? You see De Niro's eyes, right? And you start to hear the voiceover. And he talks about, someday a rain will come and wipe all this stuff off the street and so forth. And just this incessant monologue. You see De Niro's eyes and you see what he sees looking out of that cab as he drives in the street, right? And it puts you immediately into, and Schrader said about this film, he said, I'd written Taxi Driver, which was a film about interiors. I wanted to write a film that was about surfaces. And so this is the challenge he sets for himself. Like, how do we tell this story without letting you into any of this, right? And so the opening credits, and this is why I think Klosterman is very much right, is you come, and again, compared to Taxi Driver, we come, and the first thing we meet is the car. We see the wheels spinning. We see the backlight of that Mercedes, right? We come up above the car, and what turns out in the extras, they explain, is actually a very difficult shot they were pulling off. This was before you could just have a drone sort of fly over and track the car, right? So they had to have a guy leaning out with a camera, and they made him do it twice. He was a little upset about that, but he did it. And you see this car, and you see the back of his head, and so forth. And even when you see him, he's got the glasses on. Sometimes you're seeing him through the rearview mirrors, where you're actually getting his face, right? And we're not in his head at all, and we never get into his head a bit. It's a very detached, and it ends up really presaging things like, I think, Thief, where again we stay on the surface. I think it follows. We'll talk a little bit about Walter Hill's The Driver. It sort of follows some of the ways that we're dealing with that stuff in something like The Driver from 78. But it doesn't let you in, but at the same time it comes in, and just that driving Debbie Harry song, Call Me, coming in and just hitting you. The car pulls up. It's a co-star,
It's absolutely. And I mean, the scene right away, it's like on the back brake light of this Mercedes. And like, it's like that reflection, right? Like you said, this service is gorgeous, but then you hear Debbie Harry. And then the other thing, which is interesting, and I talked about it for a second with Cat People, but when you think about this, like, this is not Blondie. This is Debbie Harry, and this is Debbie Harry working with Giorgio Moroder, who's like the godfather of disco.
Yeah.
And he's from here. He's from Alto Adige, a Sud-Tyrolean town in the middle of nowhere. And this guy invented disco.
So this is where we get the other thing, is that this is a film that is LA as Italy. And Schrader says this like multiple times in the materials associated with this, is that LA is the most filmed city in the world, right? And as a person who kind of knows all the shooting locations, you get bored seeing it as a filmmaker. You're like, okay, like I'm going to feel like there's, as Schrader puts it, there's very few new ways to film LA. And he got this idea because the main influence on this film is a film called The Conformist, which this is really mimicking in some really interesting ways. He got this idea, what if I shot LA as Italy? what if I just tried to figure out all the spots in LA I could kind of give an Italian feel, and I just make it Italy. And then he comes and he gets, the Italian, Giorgio Moroder, to write the song, originally called Man Machine. Debbie Harry puts the lyrics on top of it. That just feels so that everything in this film feels like an Italian film. And it's one of the reasons why this film feels so different than anything else in Schrader's catalog is for some reason he gets this crazy idea. He's going to remake the Conformist as a story about a gigolo.
Yeah.
And he's going to film LA as Italy. And he gets, right after the final scene, you'll see a credit there. And it's a very weird credit. It says, visual consultant.
Yes.
Scarfiotti. I think is the last name.
That's right.
Who was on the Conformist and like visual. I think it's visual consultant because he can't say art director because of some union stuff, right?
Gotcha.
But in the place where you normally would see a directed by,
totally
right after the film, it's this guy Scarfiotti, and that's one of the most interesting things about the film is what did this guy do, and why did this guy work on so many films in Hollywood? And the reason why is I read he was inducted into something or other, and I read the thing about why he was inducted, and they said his talent was he could take a real space on location, not something in a studio, a real space on location. And then figure out how do we push this space to the edge of believability? That is, like, how do we take a space that's real and we light it in such a way and we set it up in such a way and we color coordinate the colors in such a way that when you're looking at it, you feel like there's something kind of dreamlike about this space. But at the same time, you're like, no, this is something you could see in life, right? This is something like so everything is on this like little hinge between reality and dream. We're not, where the space is real and you're like, well, okay, like the red light in this space, it's kind of a bar and there's red lights in this space. And like the way that we kind of float through this space and the way things are color coordinated doesn't feel like it's like completely staged, but you're like, there's something dreamlike, like if we pushed it 10 degrees further, like we'd start to head towards David Lynch, totally. Right? But we're staying just within that boundary. And that's why they hired this guy on film after film after film. And it's part of the reason why we get this dreamlike 80s that I'm obsessed with. That you see in Diva too, right?
Yeah.
Where
totally.
Everything it's like, what if we treat these spaces and we don't mess with them enough where you're like, oh, I'm watching a fantasy film, but we mess with them enough where you're like, there's something very dreamlike about this space and I can't discount it.
And it's interesting because, when I saw this film, this is definitely a film I saw in the 80s on cable. And then we got it and one of the things I remember most, two things I remember most. One is the apartment. All the art that's kind of up against the wall as you walk in. We talked about it last week with the gravity boots and that bar. But then the bar, that's the kitchen, right?
The green.
It's memorable. That was like when I started to rewatch this film, I'm like, those still live with me, those memories.
You have a blue section of the apartment near the couch and it kind of fades into this green section, right? And in The Conformist, blue is the color of disconnection, right? The Conformist has a wonderful. Most of what's going on with the Conformist in terms of color comes from this allegory of Plato in the cave, right? But generally, the way that the outside of the cave is represented is yellow and life, right? And the way the inside of the cave is represented is blue in detachment, right? And so the very first scene of the Conformist, or almost the first scene is him in the cab, but very first flashback scene in the Conformist, you have the main character, Marcello, is that right? Standing outside of a studio that is blue and very detached, and then behind him is this window into the sort of sealed studio, which is yellow, and you've got three women singing and a guy kind of banging on the piano, and he's detached, right? He's in that blue world, and the rest of the people exist in this yellow world. And the story is told really through, and this is what I mean by surfaces can be deep, is told through these colors at a key moment in The Conformist. He's inside a room that is very yellow and very full of life and very full of people dancing and stuff. And it is a very tense moment for him. He feels very uncomfortable and very tense because he's no longer, and you can actually look, and it's even staged so that you're in that yellow room and outside the window is the blue. And suddenly he's in that room and he's incredibly uncomfortable. And there's this decision coming up that I won't spoil for people.
Well, the irony there is the orator who's going out on the radio, who's actually speaking this fascist rhetoric, is blind. You have this real weird, like you have all these surfaces and colors, and there's this whole blindness amongst the politics that's happening. It's a masterpiece. We'll come back to it.
We should. We don't want to talk about The Conformist.
No, we should.
But the idea is you can tell a story through color, and you can actually watch this film too, and the same thing is going on. The colors morph throughout the film. Like when he's feeling powerful, he's in these sort of bathed in red scenes, like he's the predator, right? He's the guy. And then when he's later in it, it looks like it's got like, it looks like you're watching Howard's End or something, like it's got this sort of like humanistic, like light tones and sort of impressionistic.
The
feel.
Other piece there, and a quick aside, the other piece he lives in like an apartment building, and we'll talk a little bit about it. But he always is talking and flirting with the woman at the front desk and getting his mail or whatever. And that becomes an important space throughout the scene. But when he's taken by the detective to look into his, possibly being part of this murder, he's brought to a room that has just a console wooden TV and big fluffy carpet. Now, that kind of thick carpet. And if you've lived in the 80s, or the 70s into the 80s, like that was the living room I was watching this movie on.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that was the space.
Yeah.
And then to the whole Italy point, you go outside that apartment building and you walk in with him to go to the Westwood Arms or whatever it was called. And you have this pool and these men and women that are all models, either diving into the pool with these special dives, and you almost feel like you're on a Hollywood set.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're really as if, and the whole idea that it seems tropical. And in many ways, when I go to a place like Sardinia in Italy, it feels a lot like Italy based on the weather. And so I love a place like LA based on the weather. And it's just amazing when you talk about trying to take this film and make it, LA as played, but on TV as Italy. That whole front piece, which is another big place where a lot of scenes happen, completely works.
Yeah.
It's like the Mediterranean now.
Yeah. No, and I think you see that like multiple places. It's just such a unity of style. And that's, again, I wish I could remember his name exactly, but is it Scarfiotti?
I'll find it.
Yeah. And the way that just the coherence of the vision is just ridiculously good. I'll say too, one is the sort of look, and we go through and we have this sort of look, and this look evolves and the colors evolve, and it's very much like directly lifted from what happens in The Conformist. There's also this other piece that kind of reminds me of Diva in that, so much of the stuff is allegorical. And so I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by allegorical versus like sociological or psychological. I mean that, that we are invited to read it not as something, we're invited to evaluate it as not something true to the characters and the setting supposedly depicted. Like, this is how a cop acts. Oh, this is how a gigolo acts. We're invited to read it as an allegory for our own lives, or an allegory for art or something like that. We're invited to evaluate it in in that way. You can see this difference. I don't know if you got to watch Clute before this,
No.
but in Clute, we've got a situation where Jane Fonda plays call girl, and it is about, in many ways, it's a film about the life of a call girl. And it's an investigation of that. And you listen to Jane Fonda on the things, and she's like, she talked to dozens of call girls to figure out how to play this role, because she wanted to get it right, because it's referential, right? It's indexical, I should say. It's indexical to some experience that, in part of your evaluation of this is like, okay, does this feel, if you're looking at a gritty 70s thing, does this feel real? Does this strike me as real? Is this believable? Richard Gere never taught. I really would doubt that Richard Gere talked to 20 gigolos to prepare for the part, and as a matter of fact, Schrader says the way he came up with it is he was telling somebody, you just pick a profession. He's telling a student in one of his courses, you just pick a profession that, you think can be a metaphor or analogy for what you want to talk about. So it could be anything. It could be a waiter. It could be like a fireman. It could be a gigolo. And like, as he said the word gigolo, he's like, oh, okay, wait, hold on. Don't take that. Don't take exactly. There's a story here, because I can use gigolo to talk about what it takes for someone to allow themselves to be truly loved. And that's, for Schrader, that was what it was. Like, what does it take? What does a person have to do in their construction of self to really allow someone to love who they are versus the surfaces that they project? And what does it mean to achieve that love? And that's for Schrader, that's what it is.
So back to surfaces in this movie. The guy's name is Ferdinando Scarfiotti. Scarfiotti. Okay. I mean, I could probably pronounce that better if I really tried. Conformist starts, right? Then he does Visconti's Death in Venice. Yeah. He does The Last Tango in Paris. And then he does something with Billy Wilder, Avanti, which is interesting.
Billy Wilder in the 70s?
In 72. Huh. 74, he does something with Peter Bogdanovich, Daisy Miller. Okay. And then he goes and does, next one is he does one in between there called Barocco in 76, but then works with Schrader, then works on Cat People again with Schrader. Yeah. Then, get ready for this, he works on Scarface. And you gotta believe he did the club in Scarface and the house. Yeah, you gotta believe he's behind that first house, and the club.
Because Scarface is also happening in like an Italian villa.
Totally. And then he did this other crazy movie. I don't know if you've seen it, called Thief of Hearts.
No, I haven't seen it.
Which is a 80s movies that has this aesthetic too. We could do a whole thing on this guy.
Yeah. And so you have his visual aesthetic, and then you have this other thing, which is this allegory. And the place where, like, when I watched American Gigolo 3 times for this. The first time, actually, I thought, oh, this is pretty good. This is surprisingly good, but it didn't strike me as for some reason it didn't hit me how good it was. The second time I watched it, there's a scene where this was the scene that kicked it off for me, and I'm like, this is actually amazing. There's a scene where he sees this younger blonde kid in the garage of his apartment, right? And in looking and seeing him, he's like, oh, they've planted something in my apartment. They play because they're trying to frame him, right? He's planted something in the apartment. So he goes up to his apartment, and Gere is great in his expression. It's just disconcerted and worried in a way that you haven't seen him worry, because he's very much, part of his job is to never look stressed, to always look calm and effortless, right? And he's up there, and he starts like really tepidly kind of looking around, and then progressively just starts to tear that apartment to shreds. And he goes through the couch, and he tears up the couch, and then goes into that green kitchen, starts tearing things, and then he starts ripping things off the wall. And everything that you saw at the beginning that was introduced to you bit by bit as like the representation of who this guy was. Like, the couch, he doesn't throw out the gravity boots, but his stereo system, which has got to be like, I don't know what that cost in the 1980s, but like probably more than anything I have in this room. And he starts tearing it. He tears it all apart, and then this is the genius part. Is this guy named Julian K, right? Jules, goes down to the garage. He senses that there's some grease on his handle. He's like, the car. They planted it in the car, and immediately, like almost like we saw in French Connection, starts to tear it down to the runners.
It's exactly what I was thinking about.
And then after completely tearing that car apart, finds the jewels, at the bottom of the car. So the car that we're introduced at the beginning as being him, right? In the apartment that is him, he has completely deconstructed it. And like, not to belabor the point, some people would groan for this part, but he's deconstructed it in order to what? In order to find the jewels, the Jules, right? I mean, like, it could have been something else he finds, but the idea of this and the idea of the allegorical piece of this is it can hit without you understanding. I don't mean to be like, oh, well, this is English class, and in order to even feel something in the film, you have to understand that, oh, this is actually a metaphorical deconstruction of the self to find that core that's within. You don't have to have that to feel it in the movie, because it works on multiple levels, but that is there for you. And it's not something that you're making up. It's Schrader. That is absolutely what Schrader's doing. He's showing us at the beginning, he has constructed the self out of his objects. He's showing us he has to remove everything he's constructed to get to the core of who he is.
The one piece I didn't buy about that is, so that all happens. He's got the jewels, and now he's looking for this kid who he now knows planted them. And so he goes AWOL, and he's going to be, and so he's AWOL for like 24 hours or 48 hours. And then he goes and he visits Anna, who's the one who kind of helps him get his dates, right? And he goes, and she's like, Julian, you look like shit. And like, Richard Gere looks great. He's still got his shirt on. He's got like a one-day like thing. And she's like, I wouldn't even pimp you out to my maid. I was like, what? Richard Gere's still fucking looking good. I was like, if this is Richard Gere looking bad, the standard in LA for beauty is so high.
It's hard to sandpaper up Richard Gere, It's just a little difficult. He's in like a gray jumpsuit, and he's still like the suavest guy,
And everyone's like, you look like shit. I'm like, no, he doesn't. He looks great.
Yeah. But yeah, the thing is, he goes there and he's deconstructed himself. He doesn't have the suits. He's driving around, I don't know what, like a yellow Pinto or something.
That's right. He goes from that's the best. He goes from the convertible Mercedes to the yellow Pinto that if you hit it hard enough in the behind is going to explode.
Yeah.
Like the worst car in the world.
And you might know more about the history of LA and this time or whatever. There's some interesting scenes in the Pinto where he's looking at one side of the street and it's all these high-end stores. And he looks at the other side and it's still like the tattoo parlor and whatever. So there's a piece of this about the 80s sort of coming in, right? Like you're seeing like LA become a very different place than what LA was.
A couple of things. With the spaces in LA, I'll throw something in there. So this is predominantly filmed in Westwood. And I will go to Westwood and go to university there. That's where UCLA is like 12 years later. Yeah. And so actually Schrader went to UCLA, and I would see all the posters of his movies in Melnitz's Theater, which was a department on campus, because he was one of the more famous people who ever came out of there. Him and Coppola were the two big ones probably of that era. And then there would be the guy Alex Cox who made Repo Man, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, as he's going around shooting, he always says, even to the cop, when he says, do you want to go now? Or even to Michelle, do you want to go to Westwood and get a coffee? Do you want to go into Westwood? All of this is happening in Westwood. And Westwood has kind of almost you could say neoclassical Italianate architecture, so that would work. But there are so many moments where, you know, for example, when he's being followed by Michelle's husband's aide, the state senator's aide, and he pulls him apart, they're in front of the Bruin Theater, which is one of the great theaters.
With warriors.
With the warriors. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's the same theater where Tarantino shot Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where she goes in and see it. So it's almost part of what I love watching films for, too, is spaces at different times.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a beautiful capture of Westwood in the 80s. There's a place called Hamburger Hamlet that guy walks by before Richard Gere pulls him aside and puts him up against the Warriors sign. But the other piece that you're talking about when he's driving is he's looking at all of these other marquees and places. And one of the things that comes up in the marquee is coming home. So this is like, no, I'm wrong. That's another point, but I'll get to it. So he's looking at the kind of, like you said, the new LA versus the old LA. But I think this is kind of brought in by hardcore. So the other film I watched for this, and it's one you completely discounted.
The one I did on the treadmill.
This is a treadmill-worthy film.
It's treadmill-worthy.
This is Paul Schrader's second film after Blue Collar. He does Hardcore. And Hardcore, quick, easy, plot. George C. Scott, conservative, rapid Michigan's father. His daughter goes to L.A., runs away, becomes part of the hardcore scene there, and then he goes to find her. That's the whole plot. So he goes and he slowly converts from Midwestern conservative guy.
George C. Scott, throwing on a mustache and putting on the glasses.
A hardcore porn film producer. Not believable at all.
Yeah, no.
But he has a kind of taxi driver moment where he's looking around the city of L.A. and he's seeing all of the marquees. And I love seeing not only all the sex marquees and what's playing there and all the kind of different idea that, hey, sex movies, pornos are finally legal. Like you can buy this stuff and there's a whole different moment. But one of the things they see on one of those marquees is coming home. Mm-hmm. And they start to see all of these. I love to see the movies that are in and on the screen while this film is being made. And I just love the surfaces of the city, both of them LA. So there's LA in 1979. But think about how different the LA of hardcore is from the LA of American Gigolo. So it's like night and day.
I want to say two things about hardcore. So hardcore is an okay movie. I mean, I have a star rating system where my stars is 5. You're going to watch this repeatedly. I give it 5 stars. 4 is you would recommend this to someone as a use of their time. 3 is you're not going to feel like you wasted time. 2 is you feel like you wasted time, and 1 is I couldn't finish it. The hardcore I think is. Hardcore is definitely, it's at least a 2. I think it's probably a 3. I think it's a 3. You end that film and you're like, yeah, that was okay. It does have 2 lines in it I love, which I don't think we're ever going to do hardcore as a film on its own. So no. I got to just mention this here. The 2 lines I love. The first one is where they are at a set in a shoot. And there's the director is directing them and saying, okay, you got to do this and that. And the porn producer's this kid's an excellent director. And the other guy's like, yeah, UCLA.
And that's Schrader making fun of himself. It's so beautiful.
The other one I love because it's just such a great line. It's kind of wasted on this film. George C. Scott explains the principles of Calvinism to a sex worker. He is investigating this with iconic duo for a little bit until he just leaves her. But he explains tulip, which I guess is some principle of Calvinism, and talks about how people are chosen at the beginning of time, and you can't be chosen if you're not chosen, and no matter what you do, you don't become unchosen. And he says to her, it makes sense if you're inside it. And she says back, anything makes sense if you're inside it. And I'm like, that's actually, that headline's wasted on that. But yeah, so hardcore, I mean, very different movie though. Stylistically, I mean, I would not, if you showed me these 2 films together, I would say hardcore feels so ham-handed. you know? And this movie, American Gigolo, has a light touch. It just has such a light touch. I mean, it's as airy as that unstructured Armani jacket, if I was to make my own analogy.
The first 20 minutes of hardcore is really like these conservatives, these Calvinists in Michigan. And it's just like, come on. And it does have moments later towards the film. And I remember it just like I remember American Gigolo. And this is another piece about the 80s that are worth talking about, or 70s into 80s, is all of this stuff is coming into our living room. We're able to watch it on cable. We're ultimately able to watch it on VHS. The whole surfaces for films change. Yeah. And you have to imagine, as much as I love Schrader's films don't necessarily need to be watched on 35 millimeter. You could argue I'm different with American Gigolo, and that might be right. But when you look at Cat People, or you look at hardcore, or even Blue Collar, you could argue he's not the most beautiful filmmaker.
Hardcore, apart from like some of the scenes, but I mean, the general presentation of hardcore in the, that could be shifted a little, and it's a made-for-TV movie.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, and you could put that in a 4:3 format, and you don't need decent color to do that. Cat People's a little different, because Cat People, despite all of its flaws, like, visually, there's some really impressive stuff in it, and so you are missing some stuff. But that said, I imagine most people renting Cat People weren't like, oh, I would like to see the Italianate designs of Vittorio Scarfiotti. Like, I don't think that
Ferdinando
Scarfiotti. I don't think that was what most people were, repeatedly renting Cat People for.
No, that's not. So, but would you make the case for American Gigolo has to be watched on the big screen?
Absolutely has to be watched on the big screen. There's an interesting thing with the Cat People thing in the American Gigolo. One of the things that Schrader says in American Gigolo, which I gotta believe is actually him talking about Cat People, is he says, we didn't put hardcore sex in American Gigolo. And the reason why is this, we learned this much later, that the part of your brain which processes the erotic and the part of your brain which processes the narrative are in competition. It's very hard for them to get them to work together. And so he says, everybody says they want an erotic thriller, and they think when they want an erotic thriller that, look, you can dial up the eroticism, you can dial up the actual, libidic elements to 10, and you dial up the thriller to 10, but you can't do both at the same time, because the minute it crosses a certain line, your brain is no longer processing a narrative, right? And so he's saying that, and it's much later. He's an older Schrader, and I got to believe he's talking about a lesson that he learned on Cat People. But American Gigolo, apart from the frontal nudity of Richard Gere, which I imagine some people paused on, I imagine that's a pause scene for some people. But apart from that, like its eroticism is, I mean, it's funny because I had never seen it before, for just recently. And I just remember the furor about it, right? I just remember American Gigolo and his male gigolo and totally. But it's not actually, I mean, apart from, again, some frontal nudity and whatever, but it's the 80s, and like in the 80s, just like it becomes a decade where there's just, if you're going to get the rating, you're going to show some frontal nudity of usually women, right? It's just there's another podcast that just talks about 80s boobs, like the mandatory 80s boobs. Sure. They got to be somewhere.
But the fact that he shifted that is impressive, right?
It is
that
impressive,
it became Richard Gere, not Lauren Hutton, even though she does have a scene.
Yeah.
But as much as I fell in love and had a huge crush on Lauren Hutton as a result of this film, I do think that it was mostly, if not entirely, about him.
Yeah.
His body, his beauty, a very different, kind of vision of the male as we see in most 80s movies, even 70s movies.
Schrader even talks about it as a little bit of a female gaze movie, and And I don't know. He might be right about that. But definitely, it's not a seedy film. And so, if you haven't seen it and you hear us talking about it, you think, oh, well, this is this is 9.5 weeks or something like that. It's not. It's actually every not it. It dials up a little bit of that, but it's not a film really about the sensationalism apart from the basic plot. And it's actually a profoundly moralistic film. It is a film about surfaces and it is a film about sex, but at its core, of course, it's a critique of those things. And it's kind of an interesting thing in the 1980s. We have a lot of films which the aesthetic actually kind of revels in portraying these surfaces, right? In the underlying message of the movie is these things are ultimately ephemeral and won't bring you joy and won't bring you the sort of self-knowledge that you need. I mean, there are a couple exceptions to that. I feel like Risky Business is actually a really interesting one that revels in the surfaces and also kind of at the end comes a little down on them on the side of the surfaces. But
I'd love to talk about that movie at some point. But let me go back to one of the points you made, because I think it's interesting when we talk about the moral of this movie or potential moral. Yeah. So here we're with Richard Gere's character, and he's going, and this is the scene. It's kind of a famous scene where he goes out to Palm Springs, and there's this couple. And so basically the husband wants to watch him, presumably have sex with his wife. And then what we learn is as he's seducing her, the husband's like, do this, do that, hit her, do that. And then he's like, what is going on here? And then you're immediately with Richard Gere and you're like, oh man, no, this isn't what this is about. His whole thing is, I am here to pleasure people who have been forgotten, to remind them who they are and to remind them of their value, which I think was such a great kind of little articulation of a completely new way. It fell completely flat in hardcore when Season Hubley made that argument about, because it's been made again and again about prostitutes, as women in that frame. Like that's been made again. It kind of tired. The one that came up with Richard Gere, like kind of dating these older women and reminding them of who they were, was really powerful and really hit. So Richard Gere, when he's in this weird scene with these kind of almost 80s pornographic producers like you saw in hardcore, that was a different world for him. That was not his world. Well,
the interesting thing about the morality, and I'm glad you bring this up, is the morality. You would think that the morality of a film about a male prostitute would be about the prostitution. It's not. That's not what the morality is about. In fact, it's very ambivalent on that. And like you say, moderately pro.
Totally.
The morality is about the constructed self and about the lack of self-knowledge and the detachment. That one builds over time as they start to invest in an image of themselves that they have to maintain, and how that image of themselves ends up fooling themselves as well, right? And so he doesn't completely like drink his own Kool-Aid, right? But he kind of does, right? He thinks he is at this. He thinks he's sort of semi-accepted into this strata. He thinks that somebody will lift a finger to help him, and in fact, none of that is true. That's all this image he's created in this life he has created doesn't actually have any real connection. And so that's I think why the ending scene hits for me. The second time I watched it, not the first time for some reason, but the second time I watched it, I was incredibly touched by that last scene where Hudden puts her fingers up against the glass, and you have and again it's stolen from the Bresson film Pickpocket, which is a very different film, but the moment is has her fingers through the glass up against his forehead in this very touching way, and it's like even through this glass, this is reduced to nothing but who he is underneath all of this stuff. She will throw away everything she has constructed for him. He has nothing that he has constructed. She knows what he is without all this stuff. And yet now they're able to connect. Now with all this stuff removed, he's able to accept love, you know? And that's the core. That's the core of for me, that's the core of the film. And that's the morality. And so kind of so fascinating. You have this film, it's about a male prostitute, and it's an incredibly moralistic film. And the moralism has nothing to do with prostitution.
You redeem what is a pretty corny ending on my first watch. So I like your reading in that regard, and it kind of redeems it. The things that I was, you know, as you talk about Julian, and as when he starts losing it and comes undone, he goes to Bill Duke's apartment. So Bill Duke plays Leon, and he's the one who frames Julian.
Yeah.
And Bill Duke's apartment is another example. Like you have Giorgio Moroder and Debbie Harry doing the sound. You have this guy Ferdinando Scarfiotti doing the amazing spaces. And in that space, he has Andy Warhol's torso behind this insane couch.
Yep.
And so that whole...
And it's framed right behind Richard Gere on the scene. Yeah.
Exactly. And that whole idea of, like, you know, what you're talking about with this idea of the self, this idea of male prostitution, the idea of the male gaze, the body, right? I mean, this movie, in all of its surfaces, those surfaces are doing a lot of the reading for you too, right? So it's not like the surfaces are empty. The surfaces are actually pointing you, oh, where do you go? How do you read this film? What does it mean? And I like that about this film. Like, its interiors and its production design, I guess you would say, is amazing. We didn't even talk about the Armani suits and the whole setup of it.
Well, the Armani suits. Yeah. I mean, this is the film that made Armani for people. It wasn't like, oh, the Armani suit is a style marker for Richard Gere. It's more like this film became it. But they chose Armani. Initially, they chose Armani because John Travolta was going to be the star in it, and he had a connection with Armani. And then John Travolta bowed out. And Richard Gere's obviously built very differently, but Armani said, "Look, we'll remake all the suits for Travolta." But the key to this look that Gere has fits into the mood of the movie and fits into the 80s-ness of the movie too. The thing he's wearing in these films is called an unstructured suit, right? And what you notice in these suits is they don't have necessarily that thick lining. They don't have the reinforcement in the sort of feeling of structure. They kind of a lightly rumpled suit that kind of shows off the fabric, and this is the sort of style, and it's supposed to show this sort of carefree, sort of very suave, very relaxed, thing, and it does, right? This is not a guy coming in that feels like he's dressed in this with this structure. This is a guy who feels like he's just absolutely suave, and and it makes Armani is another star of this film.
Totally.
And but so I have to go back to something you said though. So did you find because I didn't like the ending the first watch either, but when I came through it the second time, it did hit me as touching. Did you are you just trying to be nice to me or in my point, or did you come to see the ending as how'd you land at the ending?
Okay, at the ending I was like, oh, it was so good, and then this was this corny like, oh, Michelle, thank you, why'd you do it for me?
Yeah.
But I think your breaking down of, and I love those scenes when he goes to his apartment, then he goes to the car. And I was thinking of, the French Connection, Just Like You, and Conversation, and him losing it. But that idea of him breaking down like that, and then them coming together, and her being in a different position with him now, like, because he was always lording it over her. And I think obviously there's that switch here. But I think you make a very strong case about, like, this is the argument that, Schrader is making, right? He can't open himself up to love. It's not out about the psychological, this is what happened, this is why he was abused as a kid, or blah, blah, blah. It's about all these, airs he's putting on, all these kind of frames, all these surfaces that he's finally letting go.
The effort that he puts in, the amount of time per day he puts in to projecting an image of who he believes he is supposed to be. And that's, I think, why The Conformist was such a crucial influence on this film. If you listen to the extras on this film, it's not subtle. Every single person on the extras is talking about The Conformist. The guy that's the camera operator is like, they took us into a room and they said, you got to watch The Conformist. And we watched The Conformist and they started talking about The Conformist. And I was like, okay, I think I get the point. This is supposed to be The Conformist, right? Like, it's not like we're not doing some sort of super subtle read here. Like, it really is supposed to be that. But it's taking that conformist thing outside of the sort of fascism context that the conformist exists in, and is putting it into this larger thing. Let's come back to because I think we have a little more time, but there's so many calls to a bunch of different 70s films in here. I cannot believe that when he's breaking down the car, the way he is breaking down the car, Schrader has an encyclopedic knowledge of film. There's no way he's breaking down the car and that Schrader's not thinking about the French Connection. There's just simply no way.
We just watched it and we were thinking about 70s and 80s, but the way he rips open the door, the way he takes those off, I was like, absolutely, he has to be.
And there's no way that he's breaking down that apartment and he's not thinking of the conversation, right? And what I find really fascinating is how he's using these same devices and using scenes that in some cases feel shot for shot, and he's using them to a completely different end. And this again is what I think defines this little, I mean, it's definitely sort of an art cinema, like trend in the 80s. We get to the 80s, we can talk about like Top Gun and Weekend at Bernie's or whatever. But like this way in the conversation, the idea, and again, the sociological 70s, the allegorical 80s, just for this thing, I'm not making broad pronouncements, but in the conversation, it's about how this guy, the experience that Hackman has had here will never allow Hackman to feel safe anymore, right? Never allow him to feel unsurveilled. Even when all evidence to the contrary says, okay, this is over, it can't be over. That's the sociological, psychological thing of ripping that apartment to shreds. The point in French Connection is to show, at least for this small thing, that Gene Hackman, that his obsession is over the top, that he will tear this down more than everybody.
Come on, Irv!
But in this one instance, what you see is, in this one instance, it gets overturned like 20 minutes later. But in this one instance, you see, actually, sometimes that obsession pays off. It pays off just enough that he continues to exhibit these behaviors, which everyone around him knows is going to get someone killed, right? But in this case, the obsession pays off just enough that he's able to do it. So it's a sociological point about systems that, hey, sometimes that obsessive behavior pays off enough that the system doesn't punish it. And it's also a psychological point about Hackman in like why he feels vindicated in pushing everything to this nth degree in a way that ultimately will get people killed for nothing. At the end, we see the things that come up on the screen and it's like, oh, this guy got out in 3 years. This is back on the street. Nothing has changed, right? So 2 scenes, such echoes. And then we get to American Gigolo, and it's like, what is the psychological or sociological point of this? It's like, there is none. It is an allegory. It is an allegory of the self in the same way that the conformist is an allegory of Plato's cave, right? This is an allegory for the self. We build it up around these things, and then we slowly strip all of these objects out of him. We change the colors, we do all this stuff. And at the end, he's reduced to nothing and he accepts love. And you can go through this image by image and you don't even need the dialogue. You can go through it and you could tell the story as a silent film, and I think that's fascinating. It's a different way of doing it. And I think in some ways it gets underrated because people are always looking for this authenticity in these sorts of films. And it's like, well, no, that's one way to do it. And this is another way.
Yeah, and I think also one of the things this film was up against, as probably most Schraders were, was, you made a film about a male escort, a gigolo. Yeah. Just the title was risque. Like, you were immediately putting that in people's face and saying, this is a crazy movie. And, this movie, given that, ages pretty well.
But
because it's not just about that. That's just gets people in the door. And like you said, it's just a job.
Yeah, this is a film though about a gigolo, the same way that Jesus Christ told stories about raising sheep. You know what I mean? Like it's like if you look at it and you think about it that way, like it's a parable, and I think that's the piece that. I don't know. I'm really kind of attracted to it. We watched Risky Business. Did you end up rewatching that?
I did not watch Risky Business.
Yeah,
I will.
Risky Business is another one that is like, this is a ridiculous story. In that case, it's kind of a ridiculous story. It's kind of tending a little more towards the diva side, but it's like, no, this is sort of a allegory for these things. You watch it the way,
But you think about it. So in 1980, and I think Risky Business came out in 82. You already have you already have these deep critics, allegorical critiques of the 80s.
Yeah,
it's like, wait,
how does that happen?
Let the decade get going.
How does that happen? Honestly, Jim, I hadn't thought of that.
Right?
How does that happen?
So early. I don't know.
Like how are we getting that? How are we getting that in 1980?
I think because there's so much bleed, and it's so weird because the 70s was obviously the sociological and psychological, but I think it was also probably dealing with, the deep inflation, financial class. Blue Collar was one of his other films. So like all of those struggles, like Barbara Koppel and The American Dream comes out in 80, all of those other last breath of labor struggle is also happening. So like when that's over, I guess the 80s is going to be something else.
Well, maybe here's another, just to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
Maybe they just found new ways to film cars and suits and whatever, and they wanted to use them, but it seemed a little like you can't have a plot that's like, oh, let's film all these cars and suits. Cars and suits are awesome. End of story. Like that doesn't work as a plot. So maybe we're looking at. Some of these shots. You realize some of these shots were not doable before. Like part of what you're seeing here is you're seeing like in the 70s you have this explosion of location shoots, right? But like you're seeing some of these shots. Like again, like we're seeing that tire. That's not like. That's a complex shot. Like the guy that describes what it takes to get that shot of a real tire on a road and then coming up, like, I don't know.
Steadicam, 1980, right? And then Steadicam goes into Blowout. And then, but take this. 1983, 84, 84, we're in Body Double. And Body Double is dealing with all the voyeurism, all the doubling, but then also MTV, the rise of porn, all the things that like kind of come up again in Schrader. And like De Palma's having fun with it. He's poking fun with it. It's kind of goofy. All the B movies, the new way of making films, like the critiques are happening in the moment.
Yeah.
Like these films are in conversation in a moment. And that's interesting to me.
I don't know. I wish I had thought about this more before the beginning of the podcast where we brought it up earlier, because it is the most fascinating point that we are getting this critique of the 80s, like in 1980. And I don't know, like I'm still trying to process that.
Is it really opening up the 80s, and then the 80s will be what it will be? So critique is maybe the wrong word, but then you think about that. You think about,
is our idea of the 80s built on the critique of the 80s that preceded the 80s? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So we think, oh, well, the 80s was very materialistic. Is that because it was framed from the beginning in this way? If we were to actually go back into the 1980s, would we be like, yeah, it's not that bad? People are.
Maybe
we have an Orange Julius. This is a disaster. This is the decline of civilization, apparently.
Well, maybe we can blame this guy, Ferdinando
Yeah.
Scarfiotti. Maybe it's his fault.
Yeah.
Him and Giorgio Moroder, these Italians, they came into our cinema and they fucked it up.
I still feel like there's something here too that's like that thing where, when the just in the 70s, part of what happens, of course, the Hays Code is gone, and so a bunch of people want to film stuff that is sordid, on film, but the only way to do sordid is to film a moralistic tale about sordidness, right? And so they film these moralistic tales about sordidness, but then you say, well, like, which thing preceded which? Was it actually they wanted to film the sordid thing, or was it that they wanted to tell a moral story?
And that's a super interesting take on Schrader, in particular, hardcore, as it goes from hardcore, all the way to Taxi Driver, but to hardcore, to American Gigolo. And then even after Cat People, like, there's an interesting, he even does it in hardcore. Peter Boyle takes George C. Scott to a peep room and says, look, it's legal now, buddy. It's in your neighborhood. Come on, wake up.
Jeez, that was Peter Boyle. I completely missed that.
Exactly.
Are you realizing we got Hector Elizondo in this film, too?
Exactly. Peter Boyle. Like, we're going through, actually. We're seeing a lot of...
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of the same crew.
Ed Begley Jr. was in Hardcore. I think that's his first or one of his first movies. And he's in Cat People.
Yeah.
He gets his arm chewed off in Cat People.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
So I love that shit, too, all the other actors. Anyway. We could go on forever.
I think we've reached another end here, although I really wish we could dig in more into this, like how did the 80s critique? Diva doesn't do that. Diva doesn't critique it. It just shows the stuff, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
But American Gigolo feels like a full-blown critique of the decade.
But, and at the same time, like, a lot of people are looking at them like, I need a Mercedes and an Armani.
Exactly.
What
I want to move to Westwood. On with this?
It's defining the 80s. It's causing the 80s, which it's supposedly critiquing.
I don't know. It's weird, right?
It's weird. All weird. Right. Yeah.
Well, we'll figure it out.
American Gigolo, it's on Arrow. It doesn't have the whole Happy Meal thing, but you do get a 4K. You do get a 4K of it from Arrow, and the extras are excellent. The bit rate is excellent. Just looking here, and you've got the remaster. You've got audio commentary with the commentaries. I'm usually not that way, but you've got all these little interviews with people. Like I like the little side interviews with people more than the commentary, and it does really well with that. It doesn't give me like Outland. I got like a poster and I got some like cards. It doesn't give me any of that.
Peter Boyle's in Outland.
Peter Boyle's an Outlander.
So there's another connection.
Yeah.
It's all connected, Mike.
It's all connected. Yeah. But yeah, check it out. It is not the movie that you remember.
It's not your mom's American Gigolo.
And and we'll be back next time talking about, I don't know, maybe we'll go into risky business or something.
Oh, I would love that. Joel!
All right.
Don't touch the egg, Joel!
Yeah. See you guys later.
Bye-bye. Bye.